Hey everybody, it's Matt from the Port Orchard Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to welcome you to the Chamber's 2020 primary candidate interviews. For these interviews, we've selected three different races, the two races in the 26th Legislative District and District 2, the Kitsap County Commissioner's race, which encompasses South Kitsap and a little bit of Bremerton. All told, there's 12 candidates running for these positions. We reached out to each of the candidates using the email addresses that they used when they registered with the state. Those that got back to us, their interviews are included here. Encourage you all to watch them, to listen to them. Hopefully they will help you make better choices, but most importantly, to encourage you all to vote. Thanks and enjoy. Right now we have Drew Darsow from the Democrat running for position number 1 in the 26th Legislative District, which takes up kind of the Gig Harbor, Key Peninsula, South Kitsap, and I think it reaches into Bremerton a little bit also. And Drew, thanks for joining me today. And I just wanted to, get together with you. We got some questions for you, and maybe you could just start out by telling us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me here, having this opportunity to talk to people. My name is Drew Darsow. Again, I was born in Gig Harbor. I've lived my entire life here in the 26th district, and I'm running because I want to represent the people of this district and really be an agent in the legislature to fight for what they need. I want to fight to make, this state as good as it can be for all of the citizens of the state, not just a select few, not just the ones that I'm politically aligned with, and not just the ones that would be donating to my campaign. Little more personal information about me too. I'm an economics student. I think that that's something that's really important to have people who understand economics in our state legislature. Not everyone doesn't need to be an economist, but I think it's definitely good to have people who understand, the full ramifications of what the economic choices that we're going to be making are. And I think that economics is involved in almost every political decision that's made. So I think that that's, it's a good area of expertise that will definitely help me in the legislature. The biggest thing for me is the policies that I'm going to fight for. That's, what's central to my campaign is the kind of policies that I think are going to help us reach equality in this state, whether it's on income or race or gender or education or housing, criminal justice or healthcare. I think that we need to do what we can in the state legislature to get to a society that is more equal on all of those fronts. My policy platform starts with addressing climate change. I think that we need to act quickly and aggressively on climate change so that we can still mitigate all the effects we can, especially as a young person. I think that we need to reform the tax code in this state to be more equitable. Currently, poor people are paying a higher share of their income in taxes than richer people are, which is completely backwards. We need to restructure and move to a more progressive tax code. I think that we need to make sure that every kid in our state is getting the same high quality level of education. The education you get shouldn't be based just on what neighborhood you live in. I think that our funding for our schools should be based on how many kids go to each school, not just, like I said, the wealth of your neighborhood, how much they're willing to fund your own school district. And that obviously goes hand in hand with reforming our tax code too. I think that we need to look at serious criminal justice reform. I think we need to look and try to build a system that seeks to rehabilitate people, especially, nonviolent small crimes that have been committed. I think that we need to look at getting those people back to being taxpayers, productive members of society, raising their children with their families as best that we can through programs like parole, probation, community service, work release, or classes. Obviously different sentences for different crimes. But I think that we really need to push forward those ideas of rehabilitation, not just punishment. Because we know that our current system hasn't worked. We see terrible recidivism in our criminal justice system, and I think that really needs to be addressed. Also, in the long run, that's going to save taxpayers money, because getting people out of prison, housing a prisoner for a year costs us $40,000 to $50,000 per prisoner per year in this state. And that's an incredible expense, and that money would go a long ways elsewhere towards rehabilitating those people. And in turn, like I said, turning them into taxpayers, increasing the tax base, which is going to be, a net benefit for all of us. And lastly, I think that we need to expand access to housing and healthcare as much as we can in the state. For so many lower income people, systems like Medicare only work, when you're completely destitute, right? As soon as you start to build yourself up a little bit, we take away your healthcare. I think that we need to make those kinds of programs actually work for lower income people, not just the people who are at rock bottom. Like I said, the people who are completely destitute. I think that we need to, make them systems that help you get to a better economic place in life, and not just something, that we have to be a safety net at the very, very bottom, but systems that are going to actually build people up. So that's just my basic little spiel intro. But yeah, I'd like to get into the questions now.
Okay, absolutely, yeah. So, being
Were
an
there any
economist, a lot of the questions that we have here, have to do with budgets and things like that. So, and as you can imagine, this COVID business has kind of wreaked havoc across the world, the country, the state, all the way down to our little towns. How would you propose to tackle the a potential $8 billion budget shortfall that's predicted to hit the state as a result of what we've gone through so far?
Obviously, it's rocked every part of our society to its core. And that budget shortfall is ultimately going to be the biggest job the legislators have in this upcoming session, and probably even involved in the year after that as well. These budget shortfalls aren't going to go away just this year, and we're going to really have to, develop a strong policy to deal with them. I think that it's very important that we don't fall into the trap of austerity measures in our state. Those will not help us recover quicker. They won't help us get back to normal. Those are only going to hurt people. We cannot be cutting the programs that are going to lead directly to our economic recovery, right? The kind of programs we have at the state level that involve economic reinvestment into our society are going to be vital while we're recovering from this. And they're going to be huge in helping people get back on their feet and get businesses back. So I absolutely don't think that we should be cutting any of those programs that are reinvesting, which means obviously that we have to make up for the budget shortfall somewhere else. I think that involved in the tax reform that this state has needed long before this crisis, like I said in my intro, to get the burden of taxes, which is currently and has been for many decades shouldered by the poor and working class in this state, and shift that onto those at the very, very top who actually have the means to pay it, but currently are getting by without being forced to pay much taxes on their, those with enormous wealth. So I would propose first a capital gains tax. So not a tax on people's 401k or retirement accounts or pension funds, not a tax on people making a few thousand extra dollars for themselves every year in the stock market, but a tax on those people at the very top who are independently wealthy and making tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars every year in the stock market, who currently aren't taxed at the Washington state level on that income. That could be a huge boon. It could be, somewhere up to like $1 billion a year in added revenue, which would obviously go a long ways to addressing these shortfalls we're going to see. And I think it's something that, regardless of this crisis, needed to be done. And hopefully now is a time that we can get something like that involved. Next, I would support hopefully getting a vote of the people again on whether or not we should have an income tax on the very, very highest earners, only the very highest earners. I think that obviously the poor and working class in this state have for far too long paid too high of taxes, especially compared to what, richer people are paying. So I would not support ever an income tax in the state level on, poor working class people, only on the very, very, very wealthy, like the millionaires tax, only an income tax on those making $1 million a year or more. And I think that in the past 10 years or so since that was last on the ballot, I think a lot of attitudes have changed. I think a lot of people understand the severity of our situation right now, and I would hope that they would be willing to support that. But I don't think I would entirely support the state legislature going over people's heads when they've already publicly, at least somewhat recently, opposed it. So I think that's something that we should get back on the ballot, and I think would also be another great, fantastic way to address the budget shortfalls we're going to see. Because currently our systems, like our property tax, are really just a proxy for an income tax, right? We hope that often richer people have more expensive properties, own more properties, and therefore are more able to pay higher taxes. But that doesn't always work out, especially for older people on fixed incomes. People who see their home values rise more than they can keep up with the property tax payments, people who pay off their homes. I don't think that we should be punishing those people, for making a good investment in a home and paying it off. So I think that, the system we have right now is just sort of an attempt to have richer people pay higher taxes, but it doesn't work. And I think that we need to move to, a system of something like that income tax on the very highest earners. And then hopefully also, I think that we need to increase taxes on the very, very largest corporations in this state, but currently definitely not on the ones that are struggling. So, we don't need to raise Boeing's taxes right now, or anyone, in the hospitality or travel industry. We definitely do not need to, increase the taxes on those struggling businesses right now. But on certain businesses, delivery companies, online retailers that have, that are very large companies and have had seen huge increases in their profits in the recent time, I think would be another good source of income. And like I said, as an economist, it's important to find out what that tax increase is that we can afford that won't push those those big businesses out of our state. I don't support taxing retailers out of town. And I know that that's, it's an unfortunate thing that happens often in states when they try to get larger businesses to pay a more fair share. They go to another state that's going to let them get by without paying, their fair share of taxes. So I understand that that system is obviously something that we have to deal with when we're looking at raising taxes. But I definitely believe that there's room between where we're at now on taxing them and the tax level that's going to push them out of town. I don't know exactly what that is, but I think that at the state legislature, we should definitely look at raising those taxes and see what the point that we can, increase it to without seeing huge job losses in our state would be. So those are the three main ways that I think that, we should kind of look to shift our tax code. And hopefully for the next, few years while we're in this budget shortfall, also along with the reason that I explain that I say specifically large businesses is that I don't think that we need to increase taxes on small businesses in our state. I think they're already at a huge disadvantage compared to bigger businesses, and they've already been pushed out by large conglomerate corporations in so much of our state. And I think that we definitely need to lend a hand to small businesses because they do a much better job of equally distributing, income and wealth in our society. And I think that small businesses are, they're a foundation of our country, and right now it is too hard for people to run a small business. And it's one of the reasons that big businesses have been so successful. So that's why I think, only on those with, many, many employees in the state, those very large corporations. And yeah, so all of these tax plans would help to address the budget shortfalls that we're going to see. And then hopefully once we are past those budget shortfall points, then after that, we can start to release. So, in 2-3 years, whenever that point is, we can start to release the tax burden on property taxpayers, sales taxpayers, small business B&O taxes. I think that, those people do not deserve to be paying the incredibly high shares that they have been for so many decades in this state. I think that's a really important part of moving to those wealth and income equality in our state is reforming our tax code, and hopefully it fits right now with the time frame we're in, and that plan. Hopefully we can move forward with that. I think that's basically all I have for that question.
Okay, yeah. So I want to skip down a question because, you've really, the question was, the next question is going to be, the best ways. What do you think are the best ways to control the expenses at the state level? And, part two of that was, do we really need more taxes? And I think you've addressed the tax situation quite well. What about the other side of the balance sheet or the income statement when it comes to expenses? How do you feel about, the best ways of controlling expenses on the state level?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely always going to be room for improvements in efficiency. I am not currently, when we're talking about making up the budget shortfalls and controlling expenses, I don't think that there's a lot of programs that our state runs that are frivolous, or the kinds of things that we really need. I think, a lot of them are reinvestment in our community, because that's ultimately a lot of the goal of a state government. Um, you know, I can't think of any single very large, amount of money that we're spending that would go a long way towards making this budget shortfall. I'm sure there's, probably lots of small things that, maybe, okay, well, maybe we can delay this for a few years, right? We can delay some of these programs. But even things like investing in our transit, right, in the state, which is a very large expense of the state budget, it's also the kind of thing that's going to pretty immediately bring back some jobs in our state, right? Building those mass transit systems, staffing those mass transit systems is going to bring back jobs at a time when our economy is suffering. So those are not the kind of, programs I would cut. So I think ultimately, our state budget has not been operating, like I said, with some frivolous spending, spending on things that aren't actually helping us. So I don't think that there's really a lot of room for stuff to cut. And that's why, the main points, and, if there is something, I absolutely would be open to looking at delaying certain issues, cutting certain programs that are, if they do seem frivolous, especially for the time we're in right now. But ultimately, I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of money to be made up in those programs, right? I don't think even that we should really be cutting education funding at a time like this, right? When schools are scrambling and schools are going to see budget deficits internally as well. I don't think we should need to be cutting their funding at the state level. So every one of those programs, I feel like we run into a lot of issues like that so many programs are going to be struggling right now. And that ultimately, I don't think there's a whole lot of stuff we can cut that isn't going to hurt us more than the money we're going to save on it.
Right. So then jumping back up again on talking some more about COVID-19, what role do you think government should play in economic recovery after COVID-19?
Yeah. So, sort of like I said in the last two, I think that increasing the sort of fairness in our tax code is huge. And then, like I said in that last question, certain programs that are going to provide jobs and get us on a path back to economic recovery, right? Even if they are temporary jobs, it's getting people back in the workforce, getting our economy restarted, getting the cycle of our economy restarted, and getting money back into the hands of people is going to be huge. Ultimately, I think that we are going to need a lot of federal help on this issue. I think all the states really, should be petitioning the federal government as much as we can to get support, because we do need their help. But I know that we can't always rely on it, obviously. And as a state legislator, I'm not going to be interacting with the federal government in any real large capacity at all. So, we do have to make a plan not dealing with the federal government. But I think I think the federal government should play a huge role in our recovery. I think that they have the funds, whether even through our Pentagon budget to help rebuild our country, reallocating funds from certain things that maybe we don't need right now on the federal government, because I absolutely think there are those kinds of expenditures at the federal government level. But I think that the state government we should do everything we can, obviously, to spur on our economic recovery. But we're not going to be able to lay out a stimulus package from the state government. which is one of the things that I think we would need from the federal government, or at least we should hope for. So yeah, on the state government level, like I said, I would definitely support, there are going to be a lot of people out of work. And if we are able to figure out how to fund jobs programs like increasing mass transit, right? At a time, a lot of people, it's been nice to not have as much traffic over the past few months, right? It's been the only nice part of this entire virus lockdown period. But I think that, hopefully we can address some of the traffic issues that we've had with things like mass transit, other work, either work-related group transit, things like those worker buses that I know we have in Kitsap County, expanding programs like that, things like the fast ferry in Kitsap County, and ultimately stuff like light rail that's currently being built in Tacoma, expanding systems like that. I saw someone who had made up, an artist's rendering of a subway system for Kitsap County, or some kind of mass transit system. So I think those are the kinds of ideas that, like, at a time like this, when we need to get people working again, and intersectionally address climate change, I think that would be a great, those mass transit type programs would be a great way to get some people back to work that otherwise are, not going to have a job. And it's something that we do need to do. We need to invest in mass transit. We need to make our transit system green, future-proof it, and address climate change and the role that transportation has in greenhouse gas and and climate change. So, yeah, I think that would be a great thing that the government at the state level would be able to do. I would hope that we would be able to come up with the money for it. Obviously, like I said, that's the job of being in the state legislature, is finding where to get that funding to those programs. But those are programs along those lines are absolutely the kind of things that I would support. Okay. And I would love to see us be able to get.
Good answer. So this next one is more of a personal question. How do you, as a state legislator, think that you could best support the small businesses in Kitsap County?
Yeah. So the only job I've ever worked in the 26th district, while I was in high school, I worked at a tiny small business in downtown Gig Harbor called Suzanne's Bakery. And it was a very small, like I said, they only had about 4 employees, family-run business. But because it was so small that I was able to see a lot of what went on, at a pretty young age, for the people who were running a small business, right? And the people who owned it were running the books, having to deal with the legal issues around running a small business, were also the head cooks and bakers. And I think that's a story that we see in a lot of small businesses, and a lot of people who, have reservations about the regulatory job of the government and strict regulations and the impact that those have on business. I think that largely they have the biggest impact on small businesses. Those regulations that are being passed on large businesses, huge polluters, fossil fuel companies, those are not the ones that are hurting business in any way in our society, because those businesses have devoted legal teams, accountant teams that are able to very easily, their whole job is dealing with those types of regulations. But small businesses don't have that. They're everyday people with a dream for a business that at the same time have to be a lawyer and an accountant, right, and a chef, or whatever business they're working at, right? They have to do so many jobs. So I think that a lot of those regulatory barriers to entry for small businesses, barriers that small businesses have to get through, that, like I said, larger businesses have a person whose whole job is devoted to dealing with those issues. I think that's a way to really help support our small businesses, make it easier to have a small business, I think is something that would be huge. At the same time, those tax reforms I was talking about, I think those are also huge to helping small businesses, right? I think that we really unfairly put a tax burden on those small micro businesses in our state, and that that burden should more fairly be shared by those large, much larger conglomerate corporations in our state. So ultimately, I absolutely am on the side of small business. I would like to see more small business take over a lot of the duties that, especially in the past few decades, a lot of big businesses have pushed small local family businesses out of. And I would like to see a lot of those small businesses come back. I think that small family-run businesses are often much more ethical and moral than our largest corporations. When your boss is when the owner of your company is someone that you get to see every day at work, I think that you get treated a lot more like a human at a job like that. And I don't think that always happens at our largest corporations. And I think they're much more, the systems of income and wealth inequality in our society, are not propagated by our small businesses at all. They are propagated by those largest corporations and those who, at the top of them. So I would love to see more small business. I think that we need to make specific tax and economic and regulatory policies to promote small business over large corporations. I think that I would like to see more politicians in the pocket of small business rather than in the pocket of big business like we see today. Thank you.
All right, cool. So then the last question, this is an opportunity for you to kind of summarize things. Had a lot of great ideas and you've pushed out a lot of topics. This is an opportunity here now with this last question is to kind of summarize things. Like I said in the beginning, this is the all about you time. So what makes you think that you're the best person to represent South Kitsap?
Yeah. So I've mentioned a few different things in a few of these answers, but I think that even as a young person, I've been lucky to have a lot of life experience and take in the life experience of a lot of those around me. Like I said, I have a personal experience with, being pretty close to people running a small business. My father, before I was born, ran a small factory in Tacoma, when manufacturing was still a bigger part of the industry around here. My mother is still working, has worked in sales most of her life. So I've gotten a lot of different, not my personal life experience, but listening to other people's life experience. And I think that's huge for being a representative, because no matter how much personal life experience you have, you're never going to be able to be all of the things of all of the people that you're representing. So to me, what makes me think that I'm the best person to represent us is that I have made and am going to make and will always make a concerted effort to listen to the people of my constituency. I want to go fight for these programs, the kinds of things that I'm talking about. I'm willing to lay out, the things that I agree with, the policies that I want to see, because I want to hear people's opinions on them. And if there's some of these policies that I talk about that, a sweeping majority of my constituents, right, are like absolutely opposed to, then I'm going to be opposed to something like that. Or at least I definitely want to talk to my constituents and try to explain. Ultimately, I think that all of these decisions that I'm making, even if between me and other people in my district, we end up at different end goal or end positions on these policies, I think that I want to explain to the people of my constituency that at the base level, I'm making the decisions that I'm making on these policies based on a very similar set of values that other people are finding different policy end positions on. So my opinion on what we should do with our tax policy is to make things more fair for small businesses, everyday working class people. And I think that's ultimately the goal of most of the people in our district, right? I don't think anyone would say that I want a tax policy, that's going to make it, put more of a burden on poor people than on richer people. So all of these decisions that I'm making, I'm absolutely open to change on them, but I think that we can't start a conversation without me taking a stand on some of these positions. And like I said, as a student of economics, I've seen a lot of the economic reasoning behind these kinds of policies that I'm putting forward, and I think it's always important to keep those in mind. Ultimately, as a young person, I'm going to be making decisions here at the state legislature that are going to impact me for the rest of my life. I still have more skin in this game than almost anyone else who could be running for, the state legislature. I have more time left to deal with the consequences of my decisions here. And I think it's important, as a younger person, I'm going to be more open to hearing new ideas from different people. As a younger person, I have not had the time to become, jaded or corrupted by our society, by other interests. I seek entirely to be a representative of the people of this district, right? Not whoever might be donating to my campaign. Large corporations, I think, have way too much sway in politics, and I will never be on their side. I can say that, and I think that ultimately those are some of the reasons that I think I'm the best person to do this job, because I want to represent the people here, and I'm willing to do that. And I, like I said, as a young person, I think it's I have a lot of those abilities to be more listening to the people in our district. I haven't formulated as many strong opinions on all of these topics over the course of my lifetime. I'm still open to change, but these are the things that right now I think we need to get done in order to make our state better. So yeah, ultimately policy is what's most important for a state legislature.
Cool. Okay. So if somebody wanted to know more, do you have a website, Facebook? What's the best way for people to learn more about Drew?
Yeah, so the best way to learn about me is on social media. So Facebook, Drew Darsow, Darsow for the 26th district is my Facebook page. I talk a little bit more about some of my policy issues and opinions and what I hope to do with my campaign there. You can also find me on Twitter or Instagram at Drew4Wa, Forwa. You can send me an email at drew4wa@gmail.com, Forwa again. So if anyone ever wants to reach out to me, I try to respond as quickly as possible. That's obviously up to my schedule, but or on any of those social media platforms, please reach out to me. If you want to talk about any of my policy positions. So social media is the best way to find me there. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thank you, Drew. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I would encourage everybody that's watched this to check out the other videos in the series. I think I had, out of the 12 candidates, I think I had at least 8 or 9 people respond. So a good response from all the candidates. I would encourage everybody to go to portorchard.com. I'm hoping to get these up this weekend, and there's about 10 days left before the election, give or take a couple, August 4th. Everybody, please turn your ballots in. That's probably the most important story right now is, getting everybody to vote and making sure everybody's voice is heard. Again, Drew, thank you very much for participating.
Yeah, thank you.
Hope you have a great weekend.
You too. All right.
Thank you.
All right.